Hi folks, in the Souls in Motion film review series, I look at films which reflect the topics that we discuss here, including near-death and out-of-body experiences, dreams, psychedelics, and other phenomena. Obviously, these don't tend to be mainstream films, so by reviewing them, spoiler-free of course, I hope to turn you on to some new gems that you might not have heard of otherwise. Night on the Galactic Railroad is the first of two animated adaptations of the works of early 20th century Japanese poet Kenji Miyazawa, and it was released in 1985. The Life of Guskou Budori is the second, released nearly 30 years later in 2012, by the same director. There are two reasons to review these films together and almost even treat them as a single work. And both films feature a cast of characters which are almost exclusively represented as anthropomorphic cats, and moreover the same character designs are used despite being altogether different characters. Second, both films cover the same topic found in Miyazawa's works, which is something like near-death experiences, dreams, or having visions of a lost loved one. They combine the slice-of-life genre, views of the main character's reality interspersed with scenes which might jar or confuse those who go in to view these films not expecting the more esoteric aspects. And taken from a typical mainstream viewer's point of view, these films may be considered somewhat slow and plodding, but I would say that it's deliberately so in order to communicate with the viewer in a more reflective state. In Night on the Galactic Railroad, the protagonist Giovanni ends up going on an unexpected train trip, with a bit of emphasis on the trip part. It's full of all kinds of strange characters and environments. From time to time, Christian symbolism is seen, which an astute viewer might understand, but a regular one might misinterpret as potentially being preachy. The original author Miyazawa himself wasn't a Christian, but a Buddhist. I went into this film with few expectations, to be honest with you, and while the artwork and animation is a bit on the bland and sparse end of the spectrum by today's standards especially, I've long been a fan of animation and anime, and have seen plenty of classics and plenty with worse quality, to be honest with you. The mood and subject matter, and especially the soundtrack, make up for any areas of perceived lacking. The soundtrack is by Hiromi Hosono, member of Yellow Magic Orchestra, and accomplished in his own right, though not having had material in too many well-known films beyond perhaps Lost in Translation. It's a rare soundtrack, but if you can manage to find it, you won't regret it if you're into music from Studio Ghibli and such. Now, something on a subconscious level might have led me to appreciate the film more than I might have otherwise, and I eventually connected this with my own dreams of being on trains and spiritual interpretations I've considered. Is the train a sort of universal symbolism in the human psyche for certain events in our lives and in the great beyond? Well, who really knows, but it's interesting to think about it at least. Anyway, all in all, it's a decent film. The newer film, Life of Guskou Budori, is itself a much more beautiful film visually, but somewhat less cohesive story-wise. The art rivals Studio Ghibli and, in some ways, has the same feel. Budori's family is living in hard times where famine is going through the mountain region in which they live. Eventually, he sets off on his own, and every so often is met by a supernatural being who claims that Budori is entering his realm without permission. My interpretation of this, without giving away the reasons why, would be that Budori is accessing the realm of the dead and the dying, similar to what people sometimes experience using psychedelics such as DMT and ayahuasca, or obviously in near-death experiences. It's only unfortunate from my perspective that these sequences are too few in the film, and too little is understood from them. But perhaps it's an accurate depiction of the feelings that we get from them in real life. Glimpses, bits and pieces of what's beyond. And so it's fun to watch from this point of view and to see how Budori Guskou incorporates it into his life. The train is indeed featured again, but much less prominently and with lots of other scenes and symbolism that weren't in the first. The soundtrack in this film is considerably less remarkable, but still listenable. Overall, I'd recommend that you watch both of these films, one after the other, and appreciate them for their similarities and their differences. I think different people will find one or the other to be their favorite, as each have much different strengths. Personally, I'd rate them both around 7.5, well worth a watch, especially when you're in a cozy meditative mood without a bunch of impatient people around you who would complain about not having enough action and such. So, thumbs up for both of these films from me.